We're trying to do 100 affordable homes in our first year of business, and I've got no real estate experience. I'm talking none. Property number 2, welcome. This is Zebulon, North Carolina, okay? This beautiful little piece of property here cost us $32,000, but it's gonna cost a lot more than that to get this thing turned into a move-in ready affordable home. So today I'm gonna break down some of the high-level numbers for you so you can understand how we get this thing from A to Z. All right, today I'm going to take you inside my CRM and actually break down all the numbers on a property that we just went under contract on in Zebulon, North Carolina, and explain how this $32,000 piece of dirt is going to be transformed into a $250,000 ready-to-sell property for a family to come and move into a manufactured home on a beautiful half acre of land, and how we're going to do so profitably. Let's dive into the numbers. So first, talking about the land itself. This property we found on Facebook Marketplace. It was sold by a wholesaler and we picked it up for $32,000. More often than not, we're buying properties that are at least an acre because the zoning requirements typically require 3/4 of an acre to an acre. We think this one is going to work at a half acre, but really we don't go any smaller than this. All right, so let me break down the big 5. These are the 5 biggest expenses for any project. The first is the land itself, which is $32,000 in this case. The second is going to be the home itself, which is $70,000 is what I've got budgeted here. We are going to be using different models of homes from different manufacturers, and a lot of times it has to do with the comps in the area, okay, if we think we need to be on a higher end type home versus a little bit lower end type home. Also, a big factor is based on the septic tank size that we are able to put on the property. That determines if we can do a 4-bedroom or a 3-bedroom. This one that we expect to put on the property is called the Phoenix, which is the name of a model from Cavco, is the manufacturer of the home. Okay, the third is the well. So digging for water is something that can vary a lot in cost and is one of the more difficult things to estimate because you never really know how far down you're going to have to dig on a property until you do it. But we've got that budgeted here for $10,000. After the well, you've got the septic tank. Septic tank, we've got budgeted $16,000, and I'll explain a little bit more about the septic tank process. But the 5th part is going to be the land clearing. So it's always a benefit if we can find a property that already is cleared of all the trees. In this case, lots of trees. So I've got $7,500 set aside to clear the land. We've got finishing touches. So basically once the home is ordered and dropped on the property, okay, and by the way, that $70,000, that includes delivery. Once we've actually taken delivery of the manufactured home, it's going to be in 2 halves. And so it requires 2 different semi-trucks to come and drop these things on the property. Next time you're driving on an interstate, be on the lookout. I swear, now that I'm buying manufactured homes, I see these things everywhere. You know, you'll see the wide load semi-truck that's got half of a house on it. That's what this is. Once it's been dropped on the property, we've got to have a setup crew come and do some finishing touches, okay? First of all, they've got to pour footers, and then they're going to merge the 2 halves of the home together. There's some trim work and a lot of little odds and ends involved in that. There's something called the underpinning, and then we also have to have decks built on. So that whole process, we're estimating about $5,600 for the underpinning, $3,500 for the decks. So we'll call it $9,000 or so for what we're going to consider the setup of the home itself. The other aspect is power. This is one of the little nuances with this type of niche where sometimes the power is going to be really easy and fairly inexpensive. Other times the home might be further away than we like from a power pole, and so it's going to cost more to have the utility company come out and run a power line. In this case, we're fortunate because there's 2 power poles basically on either corner of the lot, and so our estimate is only $2,000 to have the local utility company, in this case Wake Electric, to come out and bring power from the road to the home itself. So let me back up a bit, because of those 5 big expenses that I mentioned, we really don't even know if we're going to spend $1 on any of those 5 until we have done the perk test. Okay, perk test is short for percolation test. And basically what this is, it's having a soil scientist go out to the property and test the dirt to make sure that it's capable of having a standard conventional septic tank installed there. This is a huge factor in the deal being go for launch or we've got to bail on this thing. On this property, we've already had a septic test done, and it did determine that we're going to be able to fit a 3-bedroom home on the property here. And it looks like it's going to be a conventional septic, which is great. Sometimes the septic test will come back and say, hey, you can put a 3 or maybe 4-bedroom home here. However, it's going to be an engineered septic tank, which just requires a lot more components. It gets really expensive. In fact, we had another property we were looking at, but the septic test results on this other property said that the septic tank itself was going to be around $36,000. So in this case, we've got $16,000 budgeted, which allows us to be on target for our sweet spot from a profit margin standpoint. Once the home is on the land, we've got to install the HVAC system. Luckily, these homes, they don't require a huge HVAC system, so we've got $4,500 budgeted for the HVAC to be delivered and installed. Honestly, I think that one might be a little bit low. Probably need to bump that estimate up, but that's what we've got in here for now. There's a couple other odds and ends. The water sewer hookup, digging the well and installing the septic isn't the only thing that needs to be done. We actually have to connect those lines to the home. We've got $1,500 budgeted for that. Now, a couple of the other big expenses here are the cost of money and then the cost to sell the home, things like real estate commissions. So let me break down the cost of money for you. The reality is, with our goal to develop 100 homes in our first year of business, this is going to cost a lot of money. If our average build cost is $170,000, obviously, we're looking at over 17 million bucks that we've got to deploy. So this is going to come through a variety of methods, but a big factor, especially early on, is having hard money lenders lined up, having a solid deal in place that's a win-win for both us and the hard money lender, and really having a conversation about, hey, look, we're new at this. Let us prove to you that we can do this on 3 properties with you. And when those go well, we'd love to do another 3, hopefully another 4 or 5, kind of increase their appetite to work with us, but you've really got to perform and show them a great result. This is one of the things that holds a lot of people back from getting into real estate of any kind, is they think, hey, I just don't have a bunch of cash to go do this, so I've got to wait till some point in my life or my career when I can go spend $170,000 to develop a property. This is one of the biggest misconceptions, I think. When it comes to getting capital for any kind of investment, you really can be creative and just go explore all of your options. There are plenty of people out there that have capital that are willing to deploy it if they can make a good return, and if you can help communicate to them that this is a relatively low risk investment. We're buying an actual hard asset. We can have a lien put against the land, so it's secured, right? So worst case scenario, the hard money lender ends up with a manufactured home and a piece of land that has real value. And so that really makes it easier to raise funds than maybe it would be for getting people to give you money for a brand new tech startup, for example, right? Where if the whole project goes to zero, there's really no hard assets or tangible value. In this case, here's the deal that we have worked out for this one. We have a hard money lending partner on this one that's willing to give us $102,000, which does mean in this case, we're putting up over $70,000 of our own cash. But on $100,000, $102,000, the interest rate on this is 13% annualized, and we expect to hold it for about 6 months. So the monthly interest payment is going to be $1,100 on this one. And with this particular lending partner, he negotiated a balloon payment at month 12, which basically means if for any reason it takes us a lot longer to get this project developed and sold than we thought, at 12 months, there's a balloon payment. But let me just talk about what this is actually going to translate to. So between the interest payments and the profit share, which in this case we've negotiated 5%. So 5% of the profit of the sale of this property goes to our lending partner. We expect that the total cost of capital on this is ending up at $9,370. So with hard money lending, what's more typical is for there to be points charged up front, which essentially you can think of as like an origination fee and then an interest rate. So you might hear a lot of people talk about 12 and 2. That would be 2 points up front and then 12% interest With this one, we did no points up front, no origination fee, but we have a 5% profit share. So it's an interesting deal structure that could end up being more money in a return for the investor than if he had done points up front. It could be a little bit less, but I like having a profit share, honestly, because we're just very aligned on making the project very profitable. When you factor in the cost of capital and all of those build costs that I explained, all the fees, permitting fees, and then you land on the cost of selling the home, which is going to involve real estate commissions. We've got budgeted 3% of the total purchase price for the buyer's agent. That's their commission. We've got 1.5% for closing costs. And then we've budgeted a flat $4,000 for the seller commission for the agent that we're going to have represent us on the transaction. We have formed a relationship with a realtor that we know out here who's willing to do a flat rate of $4,000 starting out with us, which is awesome. So that's what we're looking at. So the combined total of selling costs here is $15,250, and that brings us to a total expected net profit margin of $52,000. So this is the land, the home, all the development costs, the permitting, all fees associated with that. It's the cost of money itself, so the interest, the profit share, and then the cost of selling the home that we just went over. All of that taken out, we still expect to have about $52,000 of net profit. So one thing that I love about this model of installing manufactured homes on a piece of land is that it's a lot easier to estimate the job costs. It will for sure be a lot easier once we've done several of these and we can compare our estimates to reality, but still a lot of these things in here that we're budgeting, we're not just making these up or getting these from ChatGPT as much as we're asking other people in the niche that have already done a bunch of these deals, and then we're comparing what they said they spent to calling contractors and getting their rough quote, and we're kind of putting those numbers together. So I think when you compare this to maybe fix and flips or building a spec home, for example, there's a lot of other kind of similar but different niches out there when it comes to developing properties. I really like that with manufactured homes. I think we're going to be a lot more consistent in our job costing. Obviously, the biggest things that can kind of really throw that off and inflate the costs are the parts of the project that have any unknowns, like how deep is this well going to need to be, and then how intense is the septic tank install going to be. Again, with that one though, we have a little bit of a heads up because the perk test that we get done initially will give us an idea on if we're going to be conventional basic septic system or if we're going to need some really complicated, expensive engineered septic. That's the breakdown on this property. We are currently in the due diligence phase. Okay, so let me explain that for a minute. When you find a property that you like, one great thing about real estate is that you can essentially claim it as yours and take it off the market by just going under contract, which usually involves a deposit of like $2,000 in our case, and that's a refundable deposit in most cases. So we're able to kind of claim the piece of land and then begin the due diligence process, which the first step of that for us is a septic test, a perk test, okay? That's what determines if we're going to back out of the deal and ask for our deposit back, or if we're go for launch and we're gonna move forward and we're ready to close on the property and get the trees cleared and just kick off the whole process. It's gonna be really interesting to see in a later video how close we came in our estimates on these costs, and also on the expectation of the sell price, which in this case is $250,000. Okay, we think we can sell this thing for $250,000 based on comps in the area, other homes that have sold, and all of our market research is telling us that these things typically sell within about 30 days of listing them. And a big reason for that is simply the price point. There's so many people that are out there searching, maybe even on Zillow, and they've just got kind of their pricing parameters set in the filters, and they're not going to see homes that are listed for 300, 350, 400 plus, but they see something pop up that's under that $250,000 mark, and those things just tend to fly. So that's one of the reasons I'm really bullish on affordable housing, manufactured homes. So stay tuned to see how well we did on estimating these costs, and I'll be doing a lot more deal breakdown videos like this so you can follow along. The whole goal here is to learn out loud so that you can just become informed and maybe develop your own interest in the affordable housing niche, specifically with manufactured homes, and maybe we end up doing some deals together. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.